Welcome to Textile Update. I'm Gwendolyn Hustvedt. The other day, when I was talking about the properties of protein fibers, I promised you a video that was specifically just about the propensity, the likelihood, the ability of wool or certain animal fibers to shrink. The shrinkage happens through a process called felting. And I wanted to talk with you just very specifically about felting. The first thing I mentioned that felting happens specifically with wool or some other protein fibers. And a way to think about this is to consider the likelihood that your own hair would become very tangled. So some people have hair that it seems like no matter what you do, your hair is not really going to become very tangled. The first thing that we might think about is for people whose hair doesn't really ever become very tangled, it's probably very straight. It probably doesn't have very much crimp to it. Right? So the minute that you start to add a bit of crimp, the odds of your hair getting tangled go up a bit. And then you could think that some hair is coarser than others, so very straight but also coarse hair is potentially going to be less tangled than hair that is fine. So just right off the bat, when we think about protein fibers, we can consider that just the size and the crimp of the hair might influence whether or not it gets tangled. Why am I talking about tangling? Because basically felting is when protein fiber, and wool is the fiber that we felt most often, it gets so tangled that it can never really be untangled. Now, this can happen with human hair. Some people are fortunate enough to have hair that has enough of a crimp and has the right cuticle structure that it can basically felt. And people who have this type of hair know that, for example, if they twist their hair will stay in the twist. I mean, like I can twist my hair, right? And my hair will sort of stay in the twist, right? It has some cohesiveness, but the fact is it's not gonna like stay in the twist. And if I twist it and I go to sleep on it, when I wake up the next morning, I can still untwist it, right? Like a lot of people of my particular complexion, I'm really going to have a tough time getting dreadlocks. And just like a word to the wise, right? Forming dreadlocks in your hair is something that your hair will do naturally. If your hair hasn't already formed dreadlocks at some point in the past, just almost accidentally, then chances are it's not necessarily going to be something that your hair is going to do in the future. So it's kind of actually almost rude to go up to somebody and say, wow, I like your hair, i.e. your dreadlocks. What do I have to do to get hair like that? I mean, the answer would be like, be a totally different person, right? Your hair does what your hair wants to do. It's not like there are people whose hair forms those inner tangled structures are using some secret, formula that they bought at the store, right? It's their hair. So in the same way, fibers like wool just love to get tangled that way. And if we tangle them up or felt them, they will never really become untangled. And what does this have to do with shrinking? I'm actually going to get this piece of felt that's right on the wall right there. Let's see if I can do this gracefully. Here, I'm going to go out of frame actually so I don't almost. Let's pull this down off the wall so we can look at it more closely. So first thing you'll notice is that this is actually just, right, it's like a piece of fabric, okay? Fibers are not falling off of it, okay? It's sturdy. It could be like a nice carpet, right? And if we look at it there, you can see that it's actually fairly thin now. But when I started, it was a stack of wool that was about this big, and it was also quite a bit longer than this. I placed it between a couple sheets of plastic, bubble wrap. I added some warm soapy water, and then I rubbed and I rubbed and I rubbed. And as I rubbed, it shrunk down and it started to condense into itself and become tangled or interlaced. And that's how it felted. Now there are some spots where like these little bits of curl, like you can see that where I added those, these little bits of curl are not quite as tangled as other things, right? But you can see it's really pretty dense. It doesn't have a lot of give to it anymore. And this is all felted up. In the same way, if you were to take a wool sweater and put it in the washing machine, I was about to say dishwasher, that would be bad too. Put it in the washing machine, then you would discover that when you took it out that it had probably gotten smaller, it would be a little bit thicker, and it would have lost its stretch. The knit, the yarns in the knit wouldn't pull apart anymore, and that's because it would be felted. So what is it about the wool fiber that lets it felt so well? Well, I'm going to have to use my hands to kind of demonstrate, but on the surface of the fiber, let's see, maybe I have a picture in a book. On the surface of the fiber, we have a structure that kind of look like scales when we look at a close-up image. And, yep, so here's an example right there in that drawing right there. Can you see how before we peeled it away, right in there, it looks like sort of scales. Well, you've seen pictures of like this in advertisements for shampoos, right? The cuticle on the surface of the hair are these little scales. Well, when the hair gets wet, it swells a little bit. When it gets wet and it's wet with warm water, it swells even more. And as it swells, the cuticles, which used to be laying smooth on the surface of the fiber, as it swells, the cuticles spread apart and stick out. All of the cuticles are pointed in the same direction. And that means that they can slide very easily along the direction of the scale, but when they try to slide back, the scales are going to catch on stuff. So it means that all of the fibers can only slide in one direction. Let's look at this felt piece again. So a fiber like that one right there, it's only going to slide in one direction. So as I rub it, right, with the warm water, as I rub it, I'm pushing it in the direction it wants to go. Whether it's this way or that way, it's going to travel in that direction, and it won't be able to travel back. And basically, eventually, I end up pushing all of the fibers towards the middle of the felt structure, and they can't ever travel back. The scales act like ratchets that keep them from going in the opposite direction. They get tanglier and tanglier until finally they're permanently tangled. And people who have really gorgeous threads in their hair will, if they've been successful and if their hair really is good at it, they'll basically have to cut them to take them off. They can't ever untangle them. And some of us feel that way, but a little bit of patience, a nice thick conditioner, you can usually get tangles out of your hair, unless your hair is really, really good at that, for the lucky few. So that is the physical property of wool, the scales that stick out and swell, and the fact that it can only slide in one direction, that causes wool to felt. And felting is cool. As you can see, we enjoy making art with felt. We make all kinds of other things with felt, taking advantage of that property. Super.